Let me tell you guys something. I may be lacking in a lot of qualities that may be helpful in life, but professional isn't one of them. Because when I tell you guys that I took pages of notes for this show, Hawkeye, I mean it. I took more notes for this show than any of the other movies or Disney Plus series that I've watched so far. And why? I have no clue. Welcome back to Access Blockbusters, everybody. This is a look back at the 2021 Disney Plus series, the last one of that year, Hawkeye. And as always, before we get into the video, if you haven't subscribed to the Access Blockbusters YouTube channel, make sure to subscribe, give this video a like, and let me know in the comments down below what you think about Hawkeye, whether or not it's your favorite, your least favorite Disney Plus show from Marvel, or maybe it's somewhere in the middle. Let me know in the comments down below, and let me know if you've rewatched the series recently as well, and if your thoughts have changed. As always with these videos, I feel like I don't have to say this anymore, but just in case anyone's watching this for the first time and hasn't seen any of the other rewatch videos, I break these videos up into 3 parts. Part 1, I talk about the context, the background, what was going on around the time of the release of the series, what I was thinking, what I thought the first time I saw the series, and what I was thinking going in to the second time, or I guess in this case, the second time. Some of the movies and shows I've seen more than once, but this is the second time I've seen Hawkeye, so what I was thinking going into this rewatch. Part 2 of the video is not necessarily a play-by-play, though in this case it might end up being more of a play-by-play where I go through most of the plot points, talk about things I liked, talk about things I didn't like, things that stood out to me on this rewatch versus the original watch. And then part 3 is basically how my thoughts may or may not have changed from the original viewing to the rewatch. So without further ado, again, if you haven't subscribed, make sure to do so, and let's get into Hawkeye. So by this point, we'd gotten 3 Disney Plus shows: WandaVision, The Falcon and the Winter Soldier, and Loki. And I think it was mostly because I didn't have much to compare those shows to that I pretty much enjoyed all 3 of them. And, looking back now, I don't think I enjoy at least 2 out of the 3 as much as I did originally. I still love WandaVision, but Falcon and the Winter Soldier and Loki, I liked a little bit more than I think I do now. And then we had Black Widow, Shang-Chi, and Eternals. So heading into Hawkeye, we were getting that quantity over quote-unquote quality from the MCU, and it was starting to sort of wear on me a little bit. I distinctly remember from Spider-Man No Way Home to Moon Knight, which was December to March, I believe, of 2022, I remember distinctly saying, thank goodness, I need a break from the MCU. And that was not something I had really said ever in the entirety of the MCU's run, because they had never released projects in that rapid succession, but we were getting basically project month after month after month, week after week after week, and it was a lot. Nevertheless, I am a sucker for Christmas. Christmas is my favorite holiday. I adore Christmas music. I'm one of those weirdos who start Christmas music literally the day after Halloween is over. I don't care. Sound off in the comments. I don't care. And so the fact that the MCU was making a Christmas show in Hawkeye, and Hawkeye is not one of my least favorite Avengers. I know everyone jokes about the least favorite Avenger thing. I think unironically, though, most people do like Jeremy Renner as Hawkeye. Adding on top of that most people also really like Haley Steinfeld, and you had yourselves the making for what could have been a very fun show. And that's really what my expectations were heading into the first watch. So then I watched the show, and look, it really didn't hit me in the same way that WandaVision did. It didn't have those high concepts like Loki. I didn't enjoy it nearly as much as Shang-Chi. But I remember the first time I saw it, I said, yeah, I had fun. And Kingpin came back, and I feel like the final episode didn't quite hit me in that same way that I really wanted it to after the reveal of Kingpin at the end of episode 5, but I still enjoyed the show for the most part. And the Christmas vibes, come on, impeccable, right? The further away from the show I got, though, the more I thought that finale didn't quite make sense. Then there were characters like Jack that not quite sure what his deal was. And then the villains were kind of weak with Eleanor Bishop, and Kate Bishop herself wasn't maybe the most likable character, at least towards the beginning. And again, going back to the whole quantity thing, because it came out at a time when there were so many other MCU projects, especially so close to Spider-Man No Way Home, the show just kind of faded into obscurity in my mind. I always remembered enjoying it, but never to the extent that I would remember specific things about the show. So count me as surprised when I came out of the show with just copious amounts of things to talk about. So I'm going to go through my notes, we're going to talk about the show, and hopefully by the end you'll have a better idea of how I think about Hawkeye, because I certainly have a better idea of what I think about Hawkeye. So let's do it. First thing is we revisit New York 2012, and while I enjoy revisiting parts of the original MCU Infinity Saga, it's at that point, and at this point in the MCU's time, it's kind of getting a little bit old. I kind of want them to push forward instead of going backwards and filling in things. Like, it's fun when Shang-Chi can fill in the Mandarin backstory, and it's fun when we can go back to 2012 and see Hawkeye from Kate Bishop's point of view. But, at that point, let's maybe move on a little bit. One thing that's noticeable at the beginning, the dialogue isn't great. And that transitions over from the prologue into the main setting in the present day, where Kate Bishop basically fires an arrow into a bell tower, and just for whatever reason, The dialogue for Kate Bishop, for Haley Steinfeld, who, like I said, Haley Steinfeld is a very likable actress, but this character of Kate Bishop is written so poorly in episode 1. Just comes off as very quippy and very cliche and very one note and one dimensional kind of bratty teenager, which I know is sort of supposed to be what the character is, but it really feels archetypal rather than a three-dimensional character. Once we get into Clint, though, the trauma from Clint, from Endgame, from all the Avengers films, that's the part that I thought immediately worked. It's funny because in a Christmas show, you may not be thinking the darker elements are the ones that stood out to me, but when Clint is watching Rogers the Musical and thinking about Endgame, that worked. That really worked. You get to see him just be such a good dad. That's what Renner can really do well, is the fact that he can play grumpy and over it and all that kind of stuff with Kate, but then he can turn it around towards the end of the show and be a good mentor, and he's just such a good dad. Rewatch the first episode, the way he talks to his kids. It's amazing. Speaking of dads, though, there's Jack, and Jack is a crazy character. We're going to talk a lot about Jack in this episode. So then there's the whole debacle with the Ronin costume, and Hawkeye and Ronin, who is Kate Bishop, team up, and they go on their adventure, and that's basically how the main brunt of the show starts. And that's fine. I mean, I think Renner's frustration with Kate Bishop at first is pretty funny. I still think that in episode 2, Kate Bishop is written pretty poorly. She still comes off as very bratty and very unlikable. And the LARPing scene, I like Grills. I do. I like the character of Grills. I like the LARPers. They're a little goofy towards the end when they come out fighting in their costumes. I like the characters, though. I just think that this whole LARPing scene could have been devoted to something else that was probably equally as funny or maybe even darker, but that's fine. But here's really what the biggest difference is watching this show for a second time versus watching it for the first time. The second time, you know Eleanor Bishop is quote-unquote the villain of the show. She's pulling the strings, basically, under Kingpin's coercion? Is that the right word? But anyways, you know that she's the villain, and so you know that the entire time Jack is not a villain, because here's the thing about this show. Here's the thing about Jack as a character, Jack Duquesne, played by Tony Dalton. The show tries so hard, so incredibly hard to make you think that Jack is the villain, to the point that while I understand the idea of a twist and the idea that you're trying to subvert expectations at the end because Jack really isn't the bad guy, it's Eleanor, and Eleanor is framing him for everything, it makes Jack as a character feel useless. And so in order to characterize Jack as someone who kind of looks shady, he comes off as an idiot. Jack is just so dumb when you look at the show realizing that he's not actually the villain. Which, okay, fine, but then when you just have scenes of Jack talking, it's like cringeworthy but funny, but unintentionally funny and cringeworthy. The show just spends so much time trying to convince you that Jack is the villain that it kind of forgot it had to make a good character. And if you devoted that attention to other aspects of the story, I feel like that the story could have benefited a lot more than with Jack. So look, in my notes I wrote, after 2 episodes, this show is kind of amusing. Episode 3 picks up, though. The action is much better. It's noticeably better because you have that one tracking shot through the car when they're driving away with the Nutcracker music. That's one of the better action scenes in the MCU, actually. You have Clint losing his hearing a little bit, so he's kind of relying on Kate Bishop. Maya Lopez enters the scene as Echo, played by Lachlan Cox. And that scene, by the way, each MCU Disney Plus show, to be fair, has at least 1 or 2 scenes that are very emotional. Quite emotional, actually. For example, in WandaVision, you can count all the scenes. There's so many. Falcon and the Winter Soldier, you have the scene with Bucky and Wakanda, for example. In Loki, you have the scene where Loki is talking to Mobius about the fact that he doesn't want to be a villain. And in Hawkeye, it's this scene where Hawkeye is on the phone and Kate Bishop is helping him by writing down what his kid is saying on the notepad. Truly an emotional scene. And here's the key, a moment of growth for Kate Bishop, because while I admit that I really don't like the character of Kate Bishop in the first 2 episodes, what I can see in this show that I can't see in a lot of other shows, to be fair, is growth, is character growth. So Kate is becoming more likable because she is understanding Clint as a character more. And you end episode 3 with a better understanding of who these characters are. So you start off episode 4 with Eleanor Bishop, Jack, Hawkeye, and Kate. And then it makes sense, right? Because Eleanor Bishop is worried that there's an Avenger involved, so she hires Yelena. So these things actually make a lot more sense to me than I originally had thought. So Yelena's introduction into the story actually feels a little more organic than I realized. Again, only problem is we're still meant to think that Jack is the villain, and it just doesn't work. But again, going back to the parts with Kate and Clint, you get more character growth because you have Kate understanding that she is ruining Clint's Christmas, his opportunity to be home with his family for Christmas, and so she tries to cheer him up. And they have another great conversation about Vormir and about his time as the Ronin. It's getting better, you know? This show, surprisingly, got better with each episode. By the time episode 4 was over, with the fight between Yelena, Maya, Clint, and Kate, I was on board. Episode 5's opening with Yelena undusting, one of the best scenes in the MCU Phase 4, because just watching these characters go through that traumatic event is somehow morbidly fascinating. And everything Yelena does and says in episode 5, basically the whole show, it's crazy because the two things that Yelena Belova had been in thus far, Black Widow and Hawkeye, she's the best part of both of those things. She's funny, the mac and cheese scene, amazing. But then she goes to heartbreakingly sad when she talks about Natasha and her death and the reason she wants to kill Clint. So even after she realizes that Eleanor Bishop is the one who hired her and she doesn't really want to kill Clint because of Eleanor Bishop, she still wants to kill Clint because of her trauma. And by the time episode 5 ends, I mean, Clint has the watch, right? The Mockingbird watch for his wife. He has the Ronin suit. He could get out. But what I love about the show at this point is that Clint is on board now because he wants to protect Kate. He and Kate are partners. This show, I was so surprised because what it did incredibly well is show growth for the characters. It's subtle. It's not quite there. And this is really one of the benefits of watching the show all in one go versus week by week. Because week by week, you don't notice these progressions as much as you do when you see the show in one go. So by the time you get to episode 5, when Kingpin's involved, Clint is like, I'm not here to save my own skin. I'm here for you. I'm here to help you. That's growth. And I think episode 6, actually, the Hawkeye finale, is one of the better finales in the MCU. Falcon and Winter Soldier finale surprised me. WandaVision finale, I love. Loki finale, I really don't love. But the Hawkeye finale tied everything together really well. I understand people's complaints about Kingpin not being the Kingpin from Daredevil, being sort of a more metahuman kind of Kingpin. I don't mind that. I'm sure we're going to see more of the actual Kingpin kind of character that we know and love in Daredevil Born Again. So it's just kind of fine to have him be this big antagonist, but more of his looming presence throughout the show. I think that they did a much better job of the looming presence of Kingpin in this show because it's all about hierarchy, right? It's all about where does this lead and who is at the top of this chain that Clint is so afraid of versus He Who Remains that I don't think that they... I guess it's more about the reveal for me and Loki. Anyways, that's a whole other tangent. The action in the finale is really fun. You see Clint and Kate working together. Yelena and Kate are iconic. And then the Yelena scene in the ice rink. Oh my goodness, the Yelena and Clint scene. It's incredible. Put Florence Pugh in everything. She has to just be the leading actress in the Avengers or whatever they're going to do in phase 5 and 6 and 7. She's amazing. And you know what? Against all odds, because I just vaguely remembered liking this show. This is one of my favorite shows in phase 4. It might be when it's all said and done. I still have to rewatch Moon Knight. I still have to rewatch Miss Marvel. I still have to rewatch She-Hulk. This might be my second favorite MCU Disney Plus show. It doesn't have the deep resonance like WandaVision, although it has its moments, and it doesn't necessarily have the mind-bending plots of Loki. It doesn't have sort of the grounded subtext of the Falcon and the Winter Soldier about racial relations in America and racial injustice. But what it does have is, I think, a compelling story, compelling characters that you really get to attach to and love, and that grow. That become better characters and better people. And I love that for the show. It's set in Christmas. I really enjoy Jeremy Renner. I enjoy Haley Steinfeld by the end of the show. Not by the beginning, but I can sort of see how they're balancing out this character to where she can get to a point at the end of the show for her arc. And overall, I really liked it. I sort of wrapped part 3 into part 2. I just sort of told you what I thought about the show versus my first time. But I think that this show greatly benefits from a rewatch because these are just not things you're going to pick up on the first time you see this show. And so I would highly recommend rewatching Hawkeye if you're sort of iffy about it the first time. You may not like it the second time, but I hope you can appreciate some of the things that I was able to appreciate this time around. So what do you guys think of Hawkeye? Let me know in the comments down below. Again, subscribe to the Access Blockbusters YouTube channel. Make sure to give this video a like, and I'll see you guys in the next one.